All right. Well, my name is Rustam Yumash, and I'm director of Brain Mind Memory Institute that I set up in Australia to promote the neurotechnologies and all this advanced brain stuff. We closely work with Yuri Kropotov, doing all the ICA stuff. It's interesting, the very precise kind of medicine for the brain. But what you're doing is absolutely fascinating, because another part of me is very Buddhist, kind of meditative, and I want to know what you're doing, and a lot of people in Australia will be very interested, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, originally, Sabine Fisher told me about your research, and when I met you, it was fascinating to hear. So maybe we'll start from Heather.
Uh-huh. Okay.
What you're doing and why you was interested with it, and just briefly.
So I had originally started with meditation research, and then I ended up in a lab that was mostly focused on dissociation and dissociative states. And we started noticing that sort of enlightenment states looked a lot like dissociative states, but mostly rooted in how the default mode network was activated or deactivated. And then as we got further into the literature, and especially since the brain imaging studies started coming out with psychedelics, we also noticed the overlap there. So we started wondering if we could take the psychedelic literature and reverse engineer it and actually use it to induce these states in individuals, and whether or not inducing those states would be helpful for those who have dissociation. So for my master's thesis, we took psilocybin research, and we realized that basically there was a squash around the percutus with a PZ from 1 to 20, and we just started seeing what happens if we do that. And the results have been pretty positive. I really enjoyed it. I kind of think that it's something close to the afterglow or of a microdose, and so we're just continuing to research that now.
Wow, that's amazing. So are you going to publish the data, or what your plans?
That's the hope. My thesis is online right now, but yeah, hopefully, I think we're going to run some more studies too to kind of get a better understanding of it, but possibly the case studies, if Yuri helps with that, we might be able to do something with those.
Well, as much as I'm aware that there's a resurgence in the interest in LSD treatment, so obviously you probably will offer more less intrusive, less invasive approach, more natural with neurofeedback. Is that what your goal?
Definitely. The idea too is because psychedelics are moving hopefully towards legalization therapeutically, that maybe we could also be bookending psychedelic treatments with neurofeedback. So the positive effects of a psychedelic are kind of tied to the likelihood or the depth of a mystical experience someone has while in the psychedelic state. So, but not everyone has that experience. So could we be using neurofeedback and qualitative EEGs to be understanding who are the people that have it and who are the people who aren't? And is there a way to prepare and train people to be able to hold that state or increase the likelihood of them having a mystical experience so they have, a more positive effect afterwards? And then Jeff has been looking at how can we possibly help them sustain the afterglow, sustain the shift. So those networks, that flexibility as they move back from high entropy flexibility to rigidity, can we keep them in that state with them not going back to their previous state? Because even with psychedelics, not everybody holds on to it. Even if they do have this high mystical experience, there are some people who start to fall off and go back into their old patterns, particularly with depression.
Great. So the interesting tradition to integrate science and traditional spiritual practices like Buddhism, like Dalai Lama, is really encouraging. He loves meeting neuroscientists and talk about brain and mind. That's really fascinating. Yeah. Thanks, Heather. And Jeff, can you just introduce yourself briefly? Some people might not know you.
I'm sure a lot of people don't know me. So my name is Jeff Tarrant. I'm a psychologist, and I'm also, board certified in neurofeedback, and so I've been in the field for a while, probably since the late 90s. And I run the Neuromeditation Institute in Corvallis, Oregon, and so that's a more recent addition to the work that I've been doing. And so the basic idea has been identifying different states of meditation and sort of seeing that they impact the brain differently. All meditations aren't the same. All meditations don't do the same thing in the brain. So we need different neurofeedback protocols targeting different brain regions and different brain waves depending on what kind of meditation style you're doing. So I've been kind of working with that and teaching that for the last 3 years, I guess, two or 3 years. And then I met Heather, and saw what she was up to. And, I had some previous interest myself already in, psychedelics and psychedelic medicine and its use for mental health. And so when I was seeing what she was doing, it was like, okay, that's very interesting. And so basically what I've been doing is kind of adapting some of Heather's original work to more specific brain regions and changing the squash protocol a little bit so that so I've been using S-Loretta neurofeedback, and so targeting specific regions of interest, and so targeting the precuneus or the posterior cingulate. I really like the precuneus better for training. I don't know why, I just do. And then kind of changing the inhibit bands rather than sort of a 1 to 20 squash or 1 to 21 squash, breaking it into specific bands. So squashing delta and alpha and beta, and kind of holding all of them down. One of the the big parts of the research that Heather was discussing is that the people who tend to have the biggest mystical experiences with psychedelics are those that can suppress their alpha. Okay. It's the alpha staying down is the biggest predictor, and so that's an interesting state to get into. And so that's what I've been really working with, is how can we teach people to get into that place and really learn to suppress the alpha in the default mode network, and to learn to navigate those spaces. So again, kind of what Heather was suggesting, that maybe we can use this as a tool to help people learn how to better utilize the psychedelic medicines if they're going to be doing those in the first place, or can it also be a tool to be used therapeutically even outside of psychedelics. One of the things that we're seeing a lot is that the people who are able to do this, who are able to respond to the protocol, they tend to become less defensive and more open. They seem to start having spontaneous insights about themselves. And so it actually does seem to mimic a bit what you see with psychedelics, the kind of the impact that it has. And so, I feel like we're still at the infancy of really understanding this. And in fact, kind of bringing David in with this and the conversations we've been having over the last few days, I've got about 100 new ideas and of ways to, take kind of what we've been doing and advance that even further, to see if we can't, facilitate those processes.
Recently I became aware from Kirk's talk about the Dalai Lama saying that if I could get enlightenment by putting electrode on my head, I would be a first patient. How do you think you can become enlightened faster by without going to the monastery for years?
It's just about self-resonance, like finding that optimal kind of place for yourself. And so if you have something that's helping you guide you there and validating that you're getting there, then yes, but you still have to engage in daily practice on your own. It's not a replacement for, it's just a bit of a mirror that helps you validate that you're entering into that state.
Okay. More precise mindfulness, yeah?
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, I would agree with what Heather says, that I feel like it's a tool to help you sort of uncover your authentic self or your true self, but you have to be doing a lot of other work. Mm-hmm. Just running the protocol, and that's where I feel like this is different than a lot of other neurofeedback, where a lot of other neurofeedback, I might hook somebody up, and basically I don't give them a lot of instructions, and there's not much else they have to do. They can just watch the screen, and things will start to shift, and that's all good. But this is very different that, you can do that to some degree, but to really get the full benefit, you have to be doing your other work. You have to be meditating on your own, and you need to be looking at your own stuff and working through your own issues. And so I don't see it as a standalone, but perhaps it could facilitate the process and maybe speed things up. I don't know.
That's
yes,
amazing.
Let's say yes.
when you mentioned the suppressing alpha and default mode network, it makes sense because that's where the self-referencing is usually related to trauma, unresolved memories and things like that. So we're moving to high order cognitive function and engagement with the world. So you need gamma and beta for that, but in an integrated way, so that you bring the kindness and loving in a very engaging way. Is that correct understanding?
Yes. Well, I would say that with some of the ways that we're using some of the other neuromeditation protocols, we're really directly looking at, can we use this as a way to help people kind of activate, a loving kindness state.
Yeah.
And actually, the loving kindness protocol that we've sort of developed is, I think, actually quite good at that. And we're looking at gamma, and but we're looking at the insula. So we're looking at the insula and the anterior cingulate, as opposed to just the default mode network.
Okay.
So this is a little bit different. I mean, I think they go together very nicely, but I'm using them as slightly different practices. They work together, but with the altered states protocols that we're kind of working with, I think it really is about getting the self, shutting the self down. If even for a small, microsecond, and that even that small microsecond has an impact, because, we're running around creating our sense of self constantly, and if you can just shut that up for just a small moment, I think that's where some of the magic is.
Well, that's amazing. Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Sure,
That's
yeah.
very interesting. What's your name, sir?
My name is David Ims.
Okay.
So I'm a student finishing up my master's degree, working on my thesis. I work in a neurology and psychology clinic under a neurologist, and so I've been approaching everything just from a different angle. And when Jeff brought me on board, what we've been doing a lot of is supplementing neurofeedback protocols with what is called deep states training or alpha theta training, as well as just some alpha training. And so I had just been developing protocols to essentially translate well-researched concepts with deep states neurofeedback into some of the newer technologies, such as the S-Loretta training that Jeff was talking about. So essentially about a year ago, we were talking about everything that he was doing, and he pulled me in on this, and so it's been very enlightening in and of itself. And so what we've been doing, or what I've been working on, is helping these same default mode network regions, the posterior cingulate, or even the cingulate as a whole, the precuneate regions, to calm down, bring up the alpha activity. So it's again a different direction, so to speak, as well as increased theta activity into a crossover state, which is associated as a hypnagogic state, and so more along that hypnotic type of line. Along with that, reducing the faster frequencies that are related with overactive thinking and various problems with that. And so in my clinic where I work, we see a lot of problems with anxiety and headaches, insomnia, and issues along those lines. They can show up very similar in the brain, and so trying to quiet those regions and help with those problems, it's been very helpful, with a lot of people, going from sleeping 2 to 3 hours a night to upwards of 7, and reducing sleeping medications and things of that nature. Along with that, as we've seen people that come in and use these protocols on them, not everybody has been interested in meditation. Sometimes it's, a teenager who's having trouble in school because they're very anxious. But every now and then, when somebody comes in who says, yeah, and I'm trying to meditate and learn it, then we're able to spend a little bit more time with them and say, well, so use this to help learn yourself, teach yourself to meditate. And so, just earlier this week and last week, there's somebody who's been starting the neurofeedback with these protocols that I've been working with, and she is able to get into the meditative state better. And during the session, she's seeing that blue aura, and that is sometimes achieved with deep meditation. And that was within, I want to say, maybe 3-4 sessions of doing the deep states neurofeedback. And so I've just been approaching it differently, also using it to help calm down people that have had head injuries, and it reduced the brain waves and brain activity that's inefficient and causing cognitive problems, but as well there's emotional lability with TBI and concussion injury, so helping that calm down and come under control is also what I've been interested in. So when Jeff asked me to be involved, I was like, absolutely.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys. I'm really looking forward to see your publications and your workshops and presentations. So hopefully we'll organize a webinar for an Australian audience, and maybe one day invite you to our conferences.
Yes.
Yeah,
that'd
very
be
good.
great.
It will be amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely.